foggy night, shadows creeping slow, whispers in the wind, where Johnny go? Blood on the hay, pitchfork gleam, midnight moon, a witness to a scream, barn doors creaking, secrets kept tight. Old man Joe seen a deadly sight, no justice found, just a broken plow, crows peck the ground, dead man's vow. Murder in the meadow, lies thick as dust, promises shattered, betrayed by trust, chaos in the cornfields.
Jamie here with Country Diggers. Today we're going to talk about the Meeks family murders, the Midnight Massacre. And I'll be reading from The Bloody Century, True Tales of Murder in 19th Century America by Robert Wilhelm. He also does murderbygaslight.com, the website. And there is also a song to this, a murder ballad, but I cannot find the music. All I found was the lyrics. So first I'll be reading that. Okay, stay tuned. All right, this is the song that's in the book. It's one of several anonymous folk songs about the Meeks murder. About 1 mile from Browning upon the Jenkins Hill, Gus Meeks and family were murdered by the Taylors, George and Bill. The first they killed was Mr. Meeks, and the woman began to cry and begged them to spare her little ones, but they told her all must die. In vain they looked around for their mischief to conceal, so loaded them into a wagon and drove to George's field. Next morning, George was seen with his team out in the field, howling around the old straw stack where the bodies were concealed. But the hand of Providence was there, as you all know very well, to spare the life of the little one on the murderers to tell. And when she rose from her strawy grave, to Carter's house she went, and told them of the tragedy and the terrible night she had spent. And when George Taylor heard of this, he went to his brother Bill, and told him of the mistake they had made. There is one we did not kill. So they hustled around, as you all know, and soon they left town. And ever since been hunted for, but still they can't be found. Now they are at large, and the officers seem to think that they are gone. And if ever they catch those desperate men, I shall complete my song. Now, it told that the only survivor, Nellie Meeks, wrote the first of the murder ballads about her own family. Now, was that hers? I'm not sure. But it was said that she did write one of them, you know. But anyway, on to the story. The Meeks family murder, the Midnight Massacre. The morning of May 11th, 1894, 6-year-old Nellie Meeks knocked on the door of Mrs. John Carter in Lynn County, Missouri. Mrs. Carter was shocked by the little girl's appearance. Her clothes were torn, her face was covered with dirt and blood, and she had a deep gash in her forehead. Her speech was barely coherent, as she told Mrs. Carter that her parents and younger sisters had been murdered the night before. Nellie had managed to escape because the killers thought she was dead. Her story was verified, and the Meeks family murder became one of Missouri's most infamous crimes. The date, May 10th, 1894. Location, Lynn County, Missouri. Victims, Gus, Delora, Hattie, and Mary Meeks. Cause of death, shooting, beating. Accused, George and William Taylor. Mrs. Carter did not have a man in the house, So she sent her 9-year-old son, Jimmy, to investigate Nellie's story. Jimmy could not find the bodies, so Nellie led him back to a haystack under which was a shallow grave containing the bodies of Nellie's father, Gus Meeks, her mother, Delora, her 4-year-old sister, Hattie, and her 18-month-old sister, Mary. Mrs. Meeks had been pregnant and miscarried at the time of her death, and the fetus was also in the grave. Though some later accounts say the Meeks had been murdered with an axe, the adults and Hattie had been shot to death. Mary and Nellie were beaten with a rock. When they returned home, Mrs. Carter sent Jimmy out to notify the neighbors of the murder. On the way, he ran into George Taylor, Howling, I don't know, Harrowing. My southern accent won't say that word good. But anyway, howling his cornfield, and told him about the bodies under the haystack. Taylor took Jimmy to his house and told him to wait outside while he hitched his horses, and they would go and take a look. Jimmy waited, but George Taylor never returned. What Jimmy did not know at the time was that George Taylor and his brother William would be the prime suspects in the murder. While Nellie was being examined by a doctor, she explained what happened. When we were going up the hill, the man without whiskers said his feet were cold and got out and walked along the side of the wagon and shot Papa. And Papa jumped out and started to run. Then Mama screamed and started to jump when they shot Mama and sister. Then they hit me in the head and I went to sleep. When she was thrown out of the wagon, she regained consciousness and heard the man trying to set the haystack on fire. When the man put me in the straw, the one with the whiskers kicked me on the back and said, "They are all dead now, the damn villain sons of bitches." They covered me up and I could not breathe good. I heard them say it would not burn as it would not catch. George and William Taylor were among the most wealthy and prominent citizens in northeastern Missouri. William was a graduate of the Missouri University School of Law, had served in the Missouri General Assembly, and also worked for the People's Exchange Bank in Browning, Missouri. But by the early 1890s, it became clear that the Taylors had not acquired their wealth through honest labor. They had been charged with forgery and larceny for writing false bank drafts and had also been indicted for arson and cattle rustling. Gus Meeks, a tenant farmer on land owned by the Taylors, was implemented in one of their cattle rustling cases. Meeks was indicted, pled guilty, and was sent to the penitentiary. About a month before the murder, Meeks was pardoned by the governor in exchange for his promise to testify against the Taylor brothers. The Taylors were anxious to get rid of Meeks and offered him $1,000 if he would leave the area. But when they came to pick him up the night of May 10th, 1894, Mrs. Meeks would not allow him to leave alone. Fearing for her husband's life, she insisted that the whole family leave with the Taylors. She did not believe the Taylors capable of murdering them all. Nellie Meeks told her story at the coroner's inquest, and indictments were issued for William P. Taylor and George E. Taylor for the murder of the Meeks family. In June 1894, the Taylors were arrested in Batesville, Arkansas, and taken back to Missouri. Though they though they offered a bond of $50,000 each, both were refused. Trials May 18th, 1895 and July 24th, 1895. The case was tried in Carrollton, Missouri. As the prisoners were being transported there, the train had to be delivered to St. Joe because the sheriff got word of a lynch mob. 250 heavily armed men, faces covered with handkerchiefs, waiting for them in Brookfield. At the trial, a number of witnesses testified to hearing the Taylors threaten Gus Meeks, and Meeks's mother, who lived with the family, told of her fears that the Taylors would murder her son. Others testified to hearing gunshots and seeing the Taylors' wagon that night. The evidence was circumstantial, but there was little doubt as to the defendant's guilt. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury reported that they were hopelessly deadlocked at 7-5 for conviction. One juror and an alternate later reported that they had been offered $750 to vote for acquittal, $750 to vote for acquittal. The second trial began in July 1895. This time the prosecution decided to charge the Taylor brothers with just one count of first-degree murder. While it was clear that the murder of Gus Meeks was premeditated, it would be more difficult to prove premeditation in the murders of Mrs. Meeks and the children. During the trials, Nellie Meeks was the ward of prosecuting attorney Pierce and his wife. Though she did not testify in either trial, Nellie did attend the trials, and during the proceedings would occasionally climb onto Prosecutor Pierce's lap. The case was given to the jury on August 2nd, 1895. This time they reached a verdict of guilty in half an hour. An hour and a half. Verdicts for the first trial, a hung jury. Second trial, guilty of first-degree murder. Aftermath. The Taylors appealed to the Missouri Supreme Court, but the verdict was upheld. George and William Taylor was sentenced to hang on April 30th, 1896. On April 11th, 1896, the Taylor brothers broke out of the Carrollton jail. They knocked a bar out of their cell, went to the roof of the jail, and used a 50-foot hose to climb down. William was quickly captured and taken to Kansas City for safekeeping until the hanging. George Taylor was never captured. William Taylor was hanged at 11 o'clock a.m. on Thursday, April 30th, 1896, before a crowd of hundreds. He left behind this written statement. To the public, I have only this additional statement to make. I ought not to suffer as I am compelled to do. Prejudice and perjury convicted me. By this conviction, my wife is left a lonely widow, my babies are made orphans in a cruel world, my brothers mourn, and my friends weep. You hasten my gray-haired mother and father to the grave. The mobs and that element have haunted me to the grave. I had hoped to live at least till the good people realize the injustice done to me, but it cannot be so. I feel prepared to meet my God and now wing my way to the great unknown, where I believe everyone is properly judged. I hope my friends will meet me all in heaven. I believe I am going there. Goodbye all. Well, I don't know. You know, if they were innocent, they wouldn't have run. They were running from something, whether it was murder or something else. They were running, so they were guilty of something. The Meeks family members are buried in a single grave in the Butte Cemetery, 5 miles southeast of Owasco. There are separate markers for Hattie and Mamie. Between the two trials, according to Quincy Daily Herald, little Nellie Meeks appeared for a week telling her story at the Eden Museum in St. Joe. She was well received, drawing large crowds. Nellie was raised by her maternal grandmother. She married Albert Spray in 1910, died due to complications in the birth of her daughter Hattie. All her life, she had a deep scar, a dent, she called it, in her forehead. Well, that was one of the sad ones. But hope you enjoyed and see you back soon.